All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most gracious and most merciful. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon all of you. Konnichiwa. Hajime mashite, yoroshiku onegaishimasu. One des. My name is Wan Ahmad Faizal. Wan Ahmad Kamal. I'm a member of parliament from Malaysia, currently serving as the head of the foreign affairs for the opposition bloc. I used to be deputy ministers in Malaysia before as youth and sports and national unity. This is my second time in speaking in Sofia University. Exactly a year ago, I was here also to speak about Dr. Mahathir's Look East policy. So this time around, my lecture is basically a deepened version of that theme by taking into account current development and situation globally and how best Malaysia and Japan can reimagine our relationship in this more troublesome world. So the title of the lecture is Sakura for the Season, Banyan for the Century, Reimagining Japan, Malaysia in a Disordered World. So basically, well, I think I shall move here, right? So that I can see the slides better. Okay. So as we all know, Malaysia and Japan has a long-standing relationship, which, oh, okay, because of the mic is there. Then I think, is it okay? Okay. Malaysia and Japan has a very long-standing relationship. In very earnest, it happened initially through a very unceremonious link, which is the Japanese occupation. But fast forward, after the World War II, Malaysia forgive and, well, not forget, but basically transform the pain of Japanese occupation into something more positive for both countries. And as we all know, among all Malaysians especially, and Japanese elites also, the role of our fourth and seventh Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, was very, very crucial in ensuring that Japan and Malaysia has a very, very close and stable relationship in the 20th and now 21st century. Why I say that? Because, can I see this slide? Yeah. Because Tun Mahathir, among all the prime ministers in Malaysia, was the one who basically formulated a coherent bilateral strategy with Japan in the name of Look East policy. That was launched in 1982. The policy was launched a year after he became prime minister. He became prime minister in 1981. I wasn't born yet. Yeah, and what made it very interesting is that, previously, not when you were. What made it very interesting is that the policy, the relationship between Japan and Malaysia was already normalized after the World War II by the first Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman. Yeah? But because most of Malaysian leaders were British trained, their fascination and their priorities then were always been the British when it comes to economic development. Malaysia might be politically independent after 57, the year where Malaysia became Malaysia, but economically, Malaysia was still under a strong influence of the British. What happened after British Prime Minister Mahathir became Prime Minister in 1981? Next. A massive and strategic exercise was launched discreetly by Malaysian government under Mahathir. He launched what he termed as the dawn raid, or in Bahasa, or in serangan subuh. Yeah? A dawn raid was a corporate exercise that caught Margaret Thatcher off guard, then the Prime Minister of Britain, where Malaysia nationalized British assets through stock share, by taking over the majority shares of those companies that were listed in the London Stock Exchange. So that was called the dawn raid because it caught the British off guard. Firms like Guthrie, Sime Darby, and many others were actually owned by the British government. And the reason why the British refused to let them go because they gave good return to the British nation. So when Mahathir came to power, Mahathir launched this policy called Buy British Last, which is to boycott the British. So that, in response to that, Mahathir wasn't just only attacking, or so-called attacking the British, but Mahathir was basically revamping the whole foreign policy of Malaysia. Mahathir not only boycotted British, but Mahathir also offered a new direction for Malaysia, which is to look east. That's why Japan come into play. Although initially, look east policy does not restrict only to Japan. It also covers the Koreans. But because Korea was still, I would say, developing, so most of the major development about look east policy was Japan focused. So Buy British policy goes hand in hand with look east policy. That's what happened under Mahathir's first term as the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Yeah, next. So what is look east policy? Look east policy basically, as you can see, it is a quite funny cartoon. This is the first Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman. This is Tun Razak. This is Tun Hussein On. And this is Tun Mahathir. So among all Prime Ministers of Malaysia, the one that has a very decisive shift that look east was Mahathir. Because these three of them, they were all British trained. They were lawyers. Mahathir is locally trained, or actually was trained in Singapore as a medical doctor. So he has a different views about British. He doesn't have this, when I talk to him, you know, he's now 101 years old. He doesn't have any nostalgia with the British. In fact, he's very critical against the British. So because he never studied in the UK, but he has good English, as you know. So as he said here, one of the reasons for the look east policy is to learn the management methods of the successful countries of the East. But it would be short-sighted to disregard the West. Yes, Mahathir might be critical of the West, the US, the Britons, the British, the French, but as how he had said, he's very pragmatic. Whatever good from the West, we must learn and take it. So the emphasis on look east policy is not slavishly following the Japanese, no, but to adopt and adapt the best cultural practices of the Japanese, especially the Bushido spirit, the Bushido ethical system, so that Malaysians can become more robust and rigorous in our venture in business, in politics, in governance. So that was what Mahathir trying to do in his tenure of ruling Malaysia for 22 years. So look east is very much a very pragmatic policy, which now in current government of Malaysia has taken into account the rise of China as well. So Japan is no longer the only East Asian country that Malaysia would like to emulate, but also China under the present current government, although I might have different of opinion in regards to how to focus on this matter. Next. Because of Malaysia and Japan will celebrate the 70th bilateral relationship next year, it means that the bilateral look east policy between Malaysia and Japan has evolved and in fact became more mature. So the present ambassador of Japan to Malaysia, His Excellency Noriyuki Shikata-san, has proposed a new I would say, upgraded version of bilateral relationship, which I also very much supportive of the term, which he terms to be look at each other policy. Previously, Malaysia in the 80s was still underdeveloping. Because of Japan's assistance and support and strong trade between us, we have become more developed, and now Malaysia has become one of the emerging markets, no longer part of the lower rank developing ASEAN states. So because of the level of development Malaysia has been able to achieve, Japan and Malaysia's relationship is now ripe to be transformed at a higher level of cooperation, more technical and more advanced, rather than just Malaysia being a student and Japan being the teacher. So this has been acknowledged by many of Japanese leaders, especially the ambassadors. Next. So, yes, Malaysia is no longer the gakusei here, and Japan is no longer a sensei. I think we are now, although not the same level, of course, Japan is still much developed and higher, materially speaking, than Malaysia. But Malaysia's experience for the past 70 years has, I would say, enriched Malaysia and helped Malaysia to be somewhat like an equal partner to Japan in certain aspects and matters, which I'm going to propose today. All right. Next. Now, this is a very recent phenomenon. As reported by Japanese-owned media, Nikkei, Japanese parents are sending their children to Malaysian schools. Well, not the public schools, but the international schools that are being opened in Malaysia. Drawn by multiracial society that is safe, high-performing, and at ease with itself. Malaysia is a multiracial country. Although it's a Muslim-majority country, where Islam is a religion of federation, Malaysia does enjoy a very rich heritage of multiracialism, a place where differences is ordinarily not anxious. So, not only Malaysia, not only Japanese, South Korean, Chinese are also sending their children to Malaysia to study in many of the international schools. I think because of cost factor, it's cheaper than Singapore, Australia, and many other European countries. In fact, the climate is much more pleasant for Japanese people. And normally, like in Malaysia, the parents, the mother will be accompanying the children who study in the international school, whereas the father maybe working in Tokyo. So this has become a norm, in fact, getting increase in number year by year. So Malaysia is no longer just a place where Japanese companies investing, but in terms of their capital, but also in terms of human capital development, like what I've shown you here. Next. In retrospect, this is how Japanese had helped Malaysia develop or industrialize. When Mahathir became the Prime Minister in 1981, one of his pet projects, which is still being continued now, although a bit struggle, is the inception of our own national car development called Proton. Proton partnered with Mitsubishi. And our second national car, which is Perodua, partnered with Daihatsu. So, two national cars built on partnership with Mitsubishi and Daihatsu has heralded what I think many Malaysians would acknowledge, our industrialization. Because with this partnership, Malaysia not only have our own national pride called Proton and Perodua, but also a set of small and medium enterprises that now able to produce many precision equipments and tools that support the car making industry. So Malaysia has risen through the ladder by participating in these car making industries through the support of the Japanese via Mitsubishi and also Daihatsu. So this is one of typical example I will always cite and quote to explain to Japanese audience. Yeah, next. Yes, next. Second example is the oil and gas. Japan is not an oil-producing country. We, Malaysians, is an oil-producing country. So, right after independence, the Japanese government already showed their genuine interest to get support from Malaysia in terms of buying our oil and gas products. So, on top of that, Japanese government also collaborate closely with Malaysian government. For example, like building these facilities in Sarawak, the Bintulu LNG complex, where the major customer of this natural gas is Japanese. Normally, the Japanese government will sign long-term contract, more than 10 years of supply of natural gas for Malaysia to Japan. So this is one outstanding example how Japan helped Malaysia become more industrialized. Yeah, next. All right. So, to date, it has been more than 20,000 Malaysians receive education and training from Japan, especially in technical fields, especially in aspects where we want to become more industrialized. So, these pictures, well, it's not that clear actually. If you close the light, maybe it might be clearer. But this is my mother. This is my mother. My mother, when she was, I think, 35, much younger than me back then. Yeah. So she was sent by our national oil company, Petronas, to work and get training about, I mean, almost a month in Japan on how to develop like a support system for retail of our petroleum products. So my mother was the only Muslim lady, a hijabi lady, in this group of men and one woman from Thailand, if I'm not mistaken. So she is, although never studied here, but she was sent by the government of Malaysia to learn from the Japanese on how to improve our oil and gas operation. So she was working in Petronas, now she retired happily. I must recall many good examples of Japanese assistance to Malaysia. Because you see, Malaysia has always been a rich and blessed nation. Why the Europeans love to come to this part of the world? One, because of the spices. Yeah, that's why the Dutch, the British, the Portuguese came to Malaysia, to Indonesia 500 years ago. But in the modern era, why the British refused to let go of Malaysia, economically speaking? Because we have oil. We have quite sizable numbers of oil wells and wealth that the British would like to have. So after the independence, most of the prime ministers of Malaysia have been trying and wrestle against the Europeans and the Americans in order to nationalize the oil. So Petronas was created, our first national oil and gas company. So after that episode, what happened? You know, the Europeans, they were upset with our policy of nationalizing the oil and gas assets. The likes of Shell, Exxon, they were upset. Why Malaysian government need to nationalize? We have been here exploring oil and gas for almost 100 of years. Yeah. So once we nationalize the assets, they just leave us just like that. So Malaysia was a bit in I would say, a problematic situation. So the only one who extended help, their hands to help, technically speaking, on building oil and gas facilities were the Japanese. Idemitsu, yeah, was involved heavily in helping to build our palm petrol station in Kuala Lumpur and various places in Malaysia. So my father was also involved. He was sent to Japan for 6 months to study and learn technical aspects from Japanese oil and gas companies. So that good faith of relationship helped bolster Malaysia-Japan post-European influence in our economy. Next. Before. Yeah. Before. All right. No, before. Next lagi. Tak ada. Ni. Right? Yeah. So, 1941 and 1945 was the most painful period of Malaysia and Japan relationship. It was an era, quite short, 4 years, of Japanese occupation. Well, we all know in the history book of Malaysia that people suffered greatly, especially Malaysian Chinese, under the hands of Japanese Imperial Army. But because of the occupation period was a bit short, the memory of those suffering is not as clear as, for example, British or the Dutch in Indonesia, because the window was very short. But still, the mark left by the Japanese Imperial Army was significant enough to really, change the fabric of the nation. Next. Before that. Okay. So, this is a very interesting poster. It's a propaganda posters in Bahasa Melayu, Malay language, produced by the Japanese Imperial Army. Tentera Inggeris, I just read first ya. Tentera Inggeris bukannya penyokong, melainkan musuh bagimu. Kami akan menembak hanya musuh saja. It means the English army is not your supporter. The Japanese was telling the Malays, it was in Bahasa, right? Except they are your enemy. We will only shoot our enemy. So the Japanese military was reminding the Malays population that you are not our enemy. We are here to liberate the Malays and the Malaysians against the British. So that's why I think at the early stage of the Japanese occupation, I think that's why Malaysians accepted Japanese occupation for a while before things got sour because of the brutality of the Japanese Kampaitai and the secret police and everything. So this episode was clearly still there in the minds of many Malaysians who are quite old now. Next. But despite of that short and brief occupation period and the brutality it brought, Malaysian, compared to any other neighboring countries, Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, was very much forgiving towards the Japanese. So I found this very interesting picture in the archive of our National Archive. I published one of the websites. Yeah. Prime Minister Kishi met our king, the first king of Malaysia, in 1957. I couldn't see here, but basically offering gifts and offering an apology. Yeah, yes, the Japanese did apologize to Malaysian people. And the Japanese, in fact, offered reparation funds, around $25 million US dollar. Back then was quite a huge sum. Although Indonesia demanded more. Thailand demanded, Thailand wasn't, okay, I think you Japanese student must know, Thailand was never under the Japanese occupation. Why? Among all Southeast Asian countries, Thailand was safe from Japanese occupation. Do you know why? Because Thailand allowed the Japanese army to pass through their territory to come to Malaya. So because of that, Japanese did not colonize or occupy Thailand. Thailand has always been like this. They are very smart in diplomacy. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that Malaysian leaders, back then was Tunku Abdul Rahman, the first Prime Minister of Malaysia, has a very, I would say, soft heart in burying the ghost of Japanese occupation, exercising the ghost of Japanese occupation. Well, it wasn't that long, actually. It was 57. Japanese left 48, around that, right? So, barely 10 years even. So, despite of that, I think Malaysia and Japan already moved on right after we became independent. So, that shows the Muslims, leaders of the Malaysian people, are somewhat, I would say this is Islamic characteristic, Once you say you seek forgiveness and you sincerely admit your mistakes, like what the Japanese leaders had done to the Malayan people, I think we buried the hatchet and we moved on. Next. So, we have, if I can send one strong message to Japanese students and Japanese audience, as a member of parliament, as a politician, as a leader, one of the leaders of Malaysia, I'm just a small guy in Malaysian politics, I can I can confirm and affirm that what happened in the past between Malaysia and Japan is the past. We are not dwelling on that anymore. Although we will remember what happened, the atrocities, the barbarity of Japanese Imperial Army, but we move on. We will not subject present Japanese people to what your forefathers had done. The sin of your forefathers had nothing to do with you today. As long as you admit that that happened in the past, and we agree to move on and work for mutual benefit or for world peace. So I think this is a very important message that I want to tell Japanese, because I know there are certain quarters in the world today who still keep demanding apology from Japanese. Okay, understandable, because what happened in their place was far more bloody than what happened in my place. But nonetheless, we must think of moving forward for the sake of humanity. So I think Malaysia's model can be learned to a certain degree by many countries on how to approach to create peaceful bridge between each other. Because now we have more pressing matter to focus, which is the survival of both countries. Next. I don't have to lecture the Japanese what are your problems. I think basically everyone knows, the whole world knows what are the major issues. I just list 3 major issues that I believe we can together help and solve each other's problems. But focusing on the Japanese side first. First, I think everyone knows Japan is facing demographic decline, an aging society, and this is basically following, with this situation, it will create more economic problems for Japan. Secondly, Japan is also facing regional anxiety, a neighborhood grown tense, where all certainties no longer hold. Okay, what do we mean by this? Simple. The rise of China brings anxiety to Japan because China has become a superpower now, at least in Asia. So, because China and Japan has a very checkered history, has a very, I would say, unresolved trauma. So, definitely, regionally speaking, Japan is facing some sort of pressure, geopolitically speaking, from China and also from Japan's ally, like the US, about Taiwan, about South China Sea. So this put more pressure on Japan to be more, I would say, creative in its diplomacy. Third issues or question might be the need to search for new growth. I think in a world today where things are very much fluid, geopolitically and geoeconomically, Japan, compared to many other countries in the world, is the most prepared country in terms of facing crisis. For example, the Hormuz is still being blocked by the Iranians because no deal being reached by the US and the Iranians. But Japan has always been preparing for the worst because the nature of Japanese society facing a lot of disasters. For example, the oil stock, the petroleum and oil and gas reserves being kept by Japanese last for 1 year, compared to many other ASEAN countries who barely able to survive now, on a weekly basis. So, because of the nature of Japanese very good in risk management, I believe Japan is also now must be ready to discover a new area of growth with Malaysia together. Next. The problems faced by Japanese is best captured by this study made by a Korean scholar by the name, he's a sociologist, Chang Kyung-suk, yeah, where he coined this concept called compressed modernity. What he meant by that is this. You know, we Asians, because we believe Europeans were superior than us because of European imperialism and colonialism and the Industrial Revolution that began in the West, we need to play catch up because we were lagging behind, like what happened in Japan through Meiji restoration. Yeah. So what the European or the West had experienced for the past 2 centuries, 200 years, we tried to make it happen in 50 years' time. So we compress the process of modernity, of modernization. At what cost? Of course, Japan became number 2 during 80s and 90s, early 90s, before the financial crisis. But at what cost? The cost that we all know experiencing by all East Asian countries, especially. Yeah, hikikomori, karoshi, death by overwork, loneliness, suicide, breakdown of families and institutions. So because why? Because the pressure of becoming more developed, materially speaking, at the expense of spirituality and other institutions. So this thing also being experienced by Malaysians, but not to the severity of East Asian countries. I will argue why. Why Malaysia, despite being modern or less modern than Japan, still I would say a happier place for, relatively speaking, when it comes to catching up on material terms. So how do we make sense of what's happening now? Well, I would invite the audience to read deeper on few matters or analysis or framework that could, give us some sense on the rise and fall of nation or civilization. Yeah. So I'll bring to you 3 names with 3 works for you to do more reading about. First is the late Sir Arnold Toynbee. Sir Arnold Toynbee studied more than 26 civilizations, living and already dead, why they rise, how do they rise, and why they fall. Malik bin Nabi is also, he is a British historian. Malik bin Nabi is a sociologist, if I'm not mistaken, Algerian sociologist, who studied the phenomena of colonialism, yeah, in Muslim world especially, by the Europeans. In his sense, more on French. Another guy by the name of Joshua Cooper Ramo. He's like a very successful financial guy, more like a strategist, corporate strategist, whom I would believe gave us some sort of new framework to understand the current age and current challenges of disordered world. I will address each of them in slides later. Next. All right, one of the major theses of Sir Arnold Toynbee is this. He said that civilization did not die from the attacks externally. Civilization, countries do not die because of foreign enemies. Civilization or nation die because of suicide. Yeah? Meaning to say, like Roman Empire, the death of Roman Empire might be attributed to the Visigoths, the pagan tribes, or the Abbasid, the Muslim empire of Abbasid, Caliphate, died because of attack by the Tatars, by the Mongols. According to Toynbee, that is not the case. You have to look at it differently. Those attacks or those conquests made by these tribal people were actually a symptom to a larger problem that was decaying in the empire or in civilization. So, because I think Toynbee made a very empirical study on many of these civilizations, and he found a common theme across all these civilizations. So, he studied across 26 civilizations. Toynbee found one pattern. The fatal wound is always internal. The wound festers internally first, not from the outside. So, the slow cooling of the creative minority, this is another concept. Why it happened? Because the creative minority, a group of elites in these countries, or civilization had failed to inject the energy and the creativity that rally the commoners. So, in Islamic terms, as a Muslim, when I read this, I can understand the role of the prophets in the past were the ones who generate this energy, this vitality of a civilization. But once the prophet passed away, the one who continued giving the energy to civilization for Muslims were the scholars. And I believe for East Asian countries too, like Confucius and many other scholars in Japanese history, in Indian history, philosophers, men of letters. These are the people who sustain the life of a civilization. So once this group of people became corrupted or being taken over by a lesser form of creative minority leaders, then the people or the civilization will collapse gradually. Then, only then, foreign invasion will happen, like the Visigoths against the Romans, the Tatars against the Muslims. Well, the Mongols failed to conquer Japan. They tried to, but they failed because maybe of the nature of the island. Yeah, next. So, Toynbee said, civilization grow not in comfort, but by answering a challenge. So, in every country, there will always be a challenge that made you become more sturdier, more resilient. So, if a civilization became, I would say, stagnant, because they have reached certain level of quality of life that made them weaker in terms of struggle. I think this is the same analysis made by our Muslim scholars called Ibn Khaldun, yeah, who also studied the rise and fall of civilization based on this observation. So, in Japan's context, Japan's challenge was once the West. That's why you answer it through Meiji Reformation. And it answered with Meiji, okay? Malaysia was domination, and it answered by guarding its interior. Malaysia also was dominated by the West, yeah? The question both now we face is this: what is the challenge of our century for Malaysia and Japan? And will the response be creative or merely defensive? So how you address immigration issues, for example, because you lack demography. How Malaysia, for example, we got stuck in the middle now, middle income trap. How Malaysia wants to outgrow our problem. Also need to think creatively. So if we to study the history of civilization, of course they are not the same. Those are classic civilization. The Roman, the Ottoman, they are already no more there. They're dead. God has buried them under the earth. But the experience of this civilization still matter to us today. Different actors, different setting, same essence. Because why? Because we are human beings. We are not cyborg civilization, we are human civilization. So the logic of nature and history still applies to Japan and Malaysia. So now, Toynbee has posed a question. How do we challenge our people to become more resilient and better in the face of current disordered world? Next. So, we need to engineer more creative minorities in Japan and in Malaysia, among the politicians, among the scholarly class, among the technocratic class, yeah, so that they can be the good example of ethics, of cultural excellence that will energize back and recorrect or restore the balance in our societies. Next. Malik bin Nabi also came with some sort of analysis that I would say worthy to emulate, because we face the same challenge, Japan and Malaysia. Malik bin Nabi said, domination is never merely imposed from without, from outside. It is invited by a prior weakness within. So Malik bin Nabi, because he learned French and studied in French, although he's an Arab, or among like a Berber, Algeria. So he coined this term colonializability, or in English, colonializability, the condition where you can be colonized. Why he said, how this thing happened? This thing happened because of faiblesse structurelle in French, which means the weakness of structure in the society. So when society became disintegrated morally, ethically, spiritually, you became more vulnerable to be colonized intellectually, culturally. So Malik bin Nabi said, he doesn't coin creative minority, but he diagnosed the same problems affecting modern countries and nations. Next. So an idea sees person. Person make things, and then things eclipse the idea. So idea matters according to Malik bin Nabi. The question of culture matters in Malik bin Nabi's sociological analysis of rise and fall of a nation. So a people bound by a living idea ordered toward a shared end. The idea, animating principle that turns a crowd into a civilization. Yeah? Idea turns a crowd into a civilization. The works, the idea produce wealth, machinery, mastery of form. Decline begins when a society keeps the things and mislays the idea that made them. The danger of every successful civilization is the same, to inherit the products and forget the principle. So I think for Muslim, for Islamic nation or civilization, what is the strongest idea for us? Is the Tawheed, the belief in the oneness of God. Once the Muslim became astray from that, that's where the decline happened in many Muslim countries, because they tried to emulate the West, right? I think Japan also worth to ponder about your own structural weakness. Where goes the main principle of the idea of being Japanese? I think I will talk to some Japanese intellectuals. According to these people, I think Japan is a very creative nation. Most of Japanese so-called cultural heritage, washoku, anything wa in the front, yeah, who actually came from China, like kanji, for example. Not really Japanese. I mean, Japanese people always embrace the best from many civilizations and made it better than the previous civilization. I think this can be testified across many of Japanese own products. In modern times, your bakery, your food, whatever you got, learned from the French, from the Italian, you made them better. The coffee, no one, I mean, Japanese coffee or cafes, much, much better than many European cafes that I went to. So, Japanese principle that I believe that could really, be something that you'll be proud of is your ability to assimilate foreign things and make them better, more ihsan in Islamic terms, than what they were before. So, this idea of Japan being insular, being exclusive, anti-immigration. Okay, we need to manage immigration, of course, the right immigration that we want here. But to be a closed nation is really not Japan, in historical speaking. Because Japan was very vibrant civilization in terms of adopting foreign things and made into Japanese own civilization. So I think Bernabe made a very correct observation about the need to maintain the right idea and principle that galvanize the civilization and nation. Yeah, for example, Malaysia. We've been colonized by the Portuguese, by the Dutch, by the British for 700 years. Of course, materially, we were backward then because of the colonialism, but spiritually, ethically, identity, we remain intact as a Muslim. I think that's one of the strongest points of being Malaysian, because of the resilience of our spiritual tradition. Japan also the same. Japan was never colonized. So compared to Malaysia, Japan was never colonized. Yet adopted the world's forms as tools only to find over generation the tool that reshaped the hand that holds it. So now Japan is basically need to soul searching to find your own study framework in order to embrace a new challenge. Okay, next. From Malaysian point of view, as a Muslim leader and a Malay leader, well, I always emphasize myself as a Muslim because I'm a Muslim. I cannot say otherwise. Yeah, Malaysia is a Muslim country, majority country, and the leaders are all Muslim actually, the main leaders. Although we adopt and adapt to non-Muslim leaders as well, those who are with us. But one of the major, I would say, strength of Malaysia is that a worldview that gives people their metabolic rhythm. Malay Muslim wakes, for example, every morning for prayer, yeah, before the world and ask anything to God. Everything asking God. So this is not that clear. Maybe Fidaus can highlight. So this is a picture of a man praying in a mosque in Shah Alam, a very famous mosque where Japanese love to visit. He's alone praying to God, you know, without any intermediaries, no priests, no scholars, only him and God. Yeah. So this is a typical image every day in Malaysia. So this man, after he prays, he will go to work, meaning to say, he will never divorce his worldly matters with his spiritual duties. Why this is a strength for Malaysia? Because this activity or this principle that govern this behavior produce this. Okay, this is a picture of Islamic intellectual tradition, a university, in the mosque. So all the great achievement done or produced by Muslim scholars, for example, in this age of AI, we all know AI is a fad now, but do we know the principle of AI? It came from, well, some of it, algorithm. Algorithm is a mathematical principle that was produced by a Muslim scholar by the name of Al-Khwarizmi. That's why we got the name algorithm from Al-Khwarizmi. So the excellence of religious tradition produced scientific excellence. Because why? Why Muslim in the past became pioneer in many scientific discoveries? For simple, obvious reason, Muslims were demanded by God in Quran to look and study the natural world. So most of the scholars of scientists like Ibn al-Haytham, Al-Khwarizmi, who give a lot of theories about science and physics, mathematics, they were actually following the idea of God asking men to study his science, which is the natural world. That create the creative energy of Islamic civilization, which we bequeath to Europe. Because Europeans were in dark ages. Europeans forbid women to study in universities, the Christendom before. Because once they traveled to Muslim world, they realized, oh, actually Muslims were more progressive. That's why they translated many Arabic manuscripts into Latin and into their own vernacular languages. From there, they became more scientific and reached Renaissance and Enlightenment. It was the Muslim who became the handmaiden for the resurgence of the European world. And later on, the Japan learned from them, the Russians learned from them, but the puzzle in the middle was the Muslim. So how the Muslim made it? Because of this tradition. So I believe Malaysia can help, offer something to the world and to Japanese, how we marry success of the world and success or the foundation of spiritual tradition. Okay, next. Okay, next. Okay, this is the practical solution. For young Japanese and young Malaysians, I advise if you can get hold onto this book. It's not a thick book, but it is, to me, one of the best books I ever read. Why? Because this book teaches or tries to open your views about how you interpret the world, the modern world. So according to Joshua Cooper Ramo, in current times, one of the most critical skills that a graduate or a professional need to have, or a leader like me to have, is to develop our own 7 sense. Okay, we have 6 sense. Yeah, as we have already, well, we have 6 sense, right? We have 5 senses, al-khawasul khamsa. Yeah, this has been taught by Islamic psychology. But then 6 sense meaning you have something like a spidey sense, But 7 sense is a different sense. It's the ability for you to perceive hidden connections in life. And that's the short way of explaining this thing. So why? Because in modern days, or modern times, the world today is ruled and governed through networks of ideas, of people, of trade, of money flow, of cultural, and many things. So it is very, very, very fluid. It is not cast in stone. Like now, I'm in Sophia University in Tokyo. but I can give my ideas, can flow through a screen, right, received by all over across the world. So that is a very crass example of network nature of the world. Next. So the diagnosis made by all these scholars, I'm sure there are many more good analyses, I just chose 3 of them, is that Japan and Malaysia can get the best from them in order to resolve our own issues and problems. Yeah? For example, Japan can think about having produced your own creative minorities. I think you still have it. Compared to Malaysia, Japan has more genuine creative minorities, yeah, and institutions. Just that, maybe institution-wise, Malaysia has better because of the role of Islam as the religion of federation, for example. Okay, next. So, what can we learn from each other? Malaysia transmit not religion, but structural knowledge, how a people preserve its interiority under pressure, how to stay uncolonizable in an age where the colonizing forces are no longer navies, but algorithms, markets, and the slow dissolution of meaning. So if we to extract the strength of institutions in Malaysia, is that I think despite all the challenges, Malaysians, especially Muslims there, will remain, I would say, maintaining their status quo, their identity, their resilience in facing the onslaught of, for example, secular worldview that destroy meanings in lives of the people and enslave us to material reality. So Malaysia has that capability, like any other Muslim countries. Yeah. Whereas Japan, the mirror warning of Toynbee's minorities must heed, and its own genius, kata, the mastery of form as the gateway to freedom, discipline as devotion, the aesthetic of care raised to a civilizational art. Neither of Malaysia and Japan offers charity, each returns to the other to something it was at risk of forgetting. Meaning to say, the solutions are there in Malaysia and in Japan. It's just that if we do more dialogue with each other at our level, I think we can identify a better response or responses to the challenges of today. Next. Okay. Next. All right. This is just a very brief proposal. Actually, I should do another lecture for this topic only. It entails more pragmatic and practical policy prescriptions. But nonetheless, we can go through together. Okay. This is my humble observation as a young politician from Malaysia who specializes in foreign affairs and international trade. For me, Japan's and Malaysia's greatest future frontiers are the Islamic world and Africa. The regions where the century's growth, youth, and dynamism will gather, and where the next chapters of the global story will be written. In next century, I think Europe and the West will be in decline in various forms and factors, demography, culturally, And the one who will be supplanting this void will be this region, Islamic world and Africa. One of the major reasons is because this region will be full of youth, meaning full of human potentials. And these regions are resource rich. You want to make your EVs, whatever chip, microchip, semiconductors, all the rare materials are mostly here in this region. So Japan want to become more advanced nation, technologically speaking. Of course, on paper, you can do it all here, but the basic ingredients are all in this region. And they are mostly Muslims. The population are mostly Muslims. Next. Because of that, I went to a few African countries, like Kenya, and Middle East, of course. And I observed from my own humble observation, Japan has their embassies there, their companies there. But Japan's present is the least organic compared to, for example, China. China is I would say, the major player in Africa. But these people, in these countries and region, I met some of the leaders, I met the ministers, the parliamentarians. They told me this. They value China's assistance and help and investment, but they want more options. They don't want to be subservient to one nation. So they want more options. So when they say they want options, of course we should pay heed to their request. What are the alternatives? Where are the Koreans? Where are the Japanese? Where are Malaysians? So that's why I said this is the next frontier for Japan's growth and survival. Next. Okay, where is Malaysia in this equation? Malaysia is a Muslim majority democracy at the very center of ASEAN. It holds exactly the access Japan lacks, Malaysia, yeah? Not as a broker seeking commission, no, we are not seeking that kind of role, but as a friend who can walk friend into rooms that could otherwise stay closed. Because we, Malaysia, are a Muslim country, our relationship and diplomacy with Africa and Islamic countries, I would say a bit more better than Japan, because by virtue of our faith, common in faith. So for example, Malaysia has always been an honest broker in many disputes. This is my Prime Minister. In Malaysia, I'm against him. But I would commend him in this matter because he had done a fairly good job in resolving dispute between Cambodia and Thailand, although with the help of the United States, of course, with Trump. But nonetheless, because of Malaysia being the chairman of ASEAN, and Malaysia has a very good track record, being a peaceful nation, a moderate Muslim country, so many of our neighbors and friends and allies across the region in the world always want Malaysia to be in the center, in helping them resolving issues that they might not be able to resolve between two of them. So it's a very good example where Malaysia middle power strength lies, ability to be an honest mediator. Yeah? Next. The doors are already open. Yes. And Malaysia already stands inside them. Yes, Malaysia are already having strong influence in all this region, the OIC, Muslim countries, the Arab world, Turkey, Iran, Muslim Africa. This is myself in 2019. See, I was standing beside the president of Iran, Rouhani, my prime minister, Mahathir, son, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, and a Turkish youth leader. So I was entrusted by my prime minister, well, I wasn't an MP yet back then, to form like a collaboration with the Turkish youth groups so that we can develop more leaders for the Muslim world. So this is something common and easily being done by Malaysia. And in the past, when Mahathir was the fourth prime minister in the 90s, after Mandela was released from his incarceration, he came to Malaysia and was given a lavish and also respectful celebration by Malaysians. Well, Mahathir is a very good friend of Mandela. Not just Mandela, Mahathir has been very good friend for many African countries. So before China became big and came to Africa, Malaysia was there. Although Malaysia was there not in size, but Malaysia was there in terms of friendship. So Mahathir might be old and he might be, die soon because of his age. May Allah preserve him, may God preserve him. But his name, his reputation, his friendship that he built for Malaysia will last longer than his lifetime. And I believe because of Mahathir's special relationship with Japan, Japan can always leverage on Mahathir's son's connection and friendship and brotherhood with these countries where Japan are quite, I would say, least organic in their presence. Okay, next. So next. So the metaphor of Sakura is Japan's gift to the world, modernity offered without imposition. Cherry blossom does not ask the season to keep it, it gives its beauty fully, then let go. All right, next. The banyan tree, which is very prevalent in Southeast Asia and Malaysia, it grows horizontally, multi-rooted, sheltering whole communities. The banyan does not rise to a single crown, it spreads, drops new roots and shelters across centuries. This is Malaysia's and ASEAN nature, and it is by instinct multipolar. Has always been. Malaysia and ASEAN countries has always been able to navigate the superpowers. We managed China long before China became like this before. And that's why there was never a big war in the region, because we know how to play with power, at least from the experience of history. So what we need to do is, Malaysia and Japan, we need to form a bridge between us. Japan and Malaysia have been building it for 40 years and more already, without ever fully naming what they were constructing. Kakehashi, yeah? Next. We need to create what is more enduring. The bridge will not be carried forward by ambassadors and prime ministers. It will be carried by generation in this session. The sakura will fall as it always does. The banyan will keep growing as it always has. And the disordered world will keep churning around them both. Next. So, thank you very much for your attention. This is just my humble proposal. I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, please correct me. If I'm right, please take it as something that you can carry it forward for the betterment of Malaysia-Japan relationship. Arigatou gozaimasu. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Thank you so much for your passionate, very passionate talk. Thank you so much. And we can take some questions and maybe you can give some answer. Okay,
Very I'm Nasrullah. I'm one of your voters in Malaysia.
Mashallah.
And I just come back from Malaysia and Japan just 2 days, 2 days ago.
All right.
And I have been in Tokyo for 9 years.
Mashallah.
So working as an engineer. And now also working with the Japanese company in Tokyo. And also one of the Look East policy student.
Mashallah.
Okay. So you talk about many things about Malaysia and Japan. So actually I have many points to share, to ask and to share.
Yeah,
but
please.
I just point out just 3 points only.
Yeah.
So for the first one is we know that Japan they use their own language, even though they're going to the outside of Japan.
Yeah.
So, but for Malaysian, we have our own bahasa.
Yeah.
We have own language,
Yeah.
which is bahasa Malaysia. So, what I am interested to the Japan is they use their own language, even though they are going to the outside of the Japan.
Yeah.
Even though their leaders go to the World Summit, they will use
Japanese English.
English, but not
Not
for
Malaysia.
us. So I want to ask you, what is your idea to bring back our own language, which we know that before this, bahasa Malaysia was the lingua franca.
Yeah.
Maybe about 500 years ago.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to do something about it.
Agree.
Okay. This is my question. The first question. For the second question is, I was interested in the look each other policy from the Japan ambassador, the current Japan ambassador in Malaysia.
Yeah.
So before this, I saw the documentary which is related to the rare earths, which in Bahasa they call Nade.
Yeah.
And Japan is very interested to Malaysia because we have many rare earths. But we have I think about 4% in the world.
Really?
Require
Yeah.
a lot another country. So, what is our policy uh, towards the rare earths in Malaysia, and also what is our policy towards Japan on the rare earths? Because we have a few problems according to the liners and some political issues about this. So I want to know about the current policy for the rare earths. Okay. So the last one is sorry for the long question. Okay, this one also related to the look each other policy. So actually, I'm one of the sepak takraw players also in Japan. So because you are the police, you are yours and
sports
minister.
Yeah.
So actually, Japan they have own sepak takraw
Team. Okay.
sepak takraw or I call team.
Team. Yeah.
So last month they went for the World Cup in Malaysia, and actually they have the Japan and the sepak takraw team almost 10 years in Japan, but they learn actually from Thailand actually.
Okay, not from Malaysia.
So they have the cooperation with the Thailand to play together and learn the sepak takraw from the Thailand, but not Malaysia.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to do something also for this one.
Yeah.
And I want you to speak out in the parliament so we can have Japan for the sepak takraw team to develop more.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Okay, so
Right.
for my question.
There are more questions. So how do you take it? Can you combine some answers together for at least some of them? And then there's two who's
Okay.
raising hand. Okay.
Okay. Can you summarize for me?
Okay.
Okay, let me answer Nasrullah San's questions first. Thank you so much for your questions. Let me begin with the last question. Okay, when I was the Deputy Youth and Sports Minister, I found out that, that was during COVID, so nothing much can be done when it comes to collaboration. In fact, I did not attend Tokyo Olympic because of COVID. But I observe, I've been in the ministry for quite some time, even during what we said Sadiq's time, I was the officer there. And I found out that actually, you're right, Malaysia, Japan, in terms of collaboration in sport, is still weak. For example, in football, you know very well Japan produced excellent grassroots football program. But I don't think FAM emulate any of those. We send Hadi Fayad here. But he's still, he's just one person. So I think there are many things that I think we can learn from Japan. Of course, nothing much can they learn from us except our failures in sports. But badminton may be different. Badminton maybe Japan can really learn from us. Which I think we have a Malaysian coach in Japan, right? So I agree with you on that part. Sepak takraw, I think it's time for us to help Japan be part of the superpower. Okay, I take your proposal for that. Okay. Secondly, about rare earth. Okay, rare earth in Malaysia is still, the policy is still grey. Meaning to say, the federal government has not able to come out with a concrete, I would say, law that governs the extraction and development of the downstream or rare earth processing. One of the major challenges is the technology to extract and refine rare earth is mostly in China. And China do not want to share this technology at all. Although I asked the ambassador, can Japanese side do it? He said yes. Okay. So just that there's no political will yet from the federal government on how to go about it. I think one of the reasons why this thing is a bit slow, despite we have the wealth of rare earth, because most of the rare earth deposits are in the opposition states, Kelantan, Terengganu, Kedah, Perak, Perak although government. But nonetheless, because of land matters or resource matters are now state-based, not being federalized yet like oil and gas. That's why a lot of issues cannot be reached or concluded with Japan. If we become part of the government, definitely I would talk to Japan about this. Yeah, inshallah after election. And last question is about this bahasa. I agree with you. We should be proud that bahasa should be one of the international languages in UN. But if the leaders do not use it, not just the leaders actually, the leaders is just one creative minority. The problem in Malaysia, most of our intelligentsia, the intellectuals, the economists, also do not want to use bahasa to convey their ideas. Compared to Japanese, compared to the Thais, compared to Indonesian, who proudly use Indonesian or bahasa to convey difficult subjects. The problem with us is like a muscle, if we don't use or utilize our muscle, we become weak. Just like bahasa, we don't utilize bahasa for intellectual discourse, bahasa become alien to our thinking. I'm sorry, I'm thinking in English now. Right? Different. If I speak in bahasa, it will be different. There are nuances, In Japanese also, I think we all know because language shapes worldview. So I agree with you. I want bahasa to be part of our foreign policy, like what Ismail Sabri, the previous 9 prime ministers, had done. I will champion this as well. Thank you for your advice and concern. Right.
So can we take 2 more questions, maybe 2 together about Islam?
Yeah.
Okay. There are 2 questions. One is about simply about how can we teach something to Japanese people when Malaysians themselves are not doing well in that religion, maybe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, another is about Islam as well. If now the Japanese getting more Muslim friendly, does it help the relationship between Japan and Malaysia?
Okay. Okay. Again, this requires another hour for a lecture. But again, I always tell, we, as Muslims, we should always tell ourselves and also our friendly Japanese friends and families that definitely Muslims in Malaysia are not perfect. We also have our own shortcomings in many things. Cleanliness, punctuality, But nonetheless, as an ambassadors of Islam, we know what is right, what is wrong, what are the teachings of Islam, the correct teachings of Islam. So what we must preach, when I say preach, we must behave to the best of our ability in action and in speeches to convey the ideas and message of Islam, the best ideal to the Japanese, so that they understand Islam and Japan culture and tradition are not that estranged at all. They are actually compatible to each other in many, 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 many ways. But of course, action speaks louder than word. Then, as a Malaysian, I'm also guilty of these shortcomings, and I would love to improve myself before I preach to others. Thank you.
We will reach to the third question, and that is about anti-foreigner sentiment that is recently happening in Japan. How would you navigate and promote collaboration between Japan and Malaysia? Since we are a majority Muslim country, that means if there is anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-migrant sentiment, and how can we establish more better relationship?
I think for this aspect, I have talked to the ambassador, and I've talked to some of the Japanese members of parliament, the Diet. Yeah, I met them last year during summer. I couldn't meet them this year around, but hopefully some next time I will talk to them again. There needs to be more exchange programs between Japanese leaders and students. By having these sort of programs, you send more Japanese young leaders to Malaysia. They will learn more about our strength as a multiracial nation, how we manage differences, how we manage Islam in public, how we manage differences in religion and culture. And once they learn that from Malaysia, they can learn and adopt that in Japan, in managing the immigrants. I'm sure there must be some programs or policy the Diet and the government of Japan must enact in order to resolve the tension between Japanese locals and immigrants. Definitely the onus is on the immigrants, but the government also must come up with a strong and, I would say, creative response to make sure that the immigrants, especially the Muslims, can adopt here, especially language and culture and tradition. So Malaysia can be one of the laboratory for Japanese to experiment about multiracialism. So come here to Malaysia over summer for summer school and what other programs that you can have with the Malaysian government. And from there, I think slowly, Japan's will be more, I would say, able to respond creatively to immigration issues. That is a concrete solution, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So, when the idea to bridge the relationship between Japan and the African and Middle Eastern countries
Yeah.
Via Malaysia, right? That
Yeah.
is your idea. And when it comes to that matter, the question is about why don't you highlight more about the role of Japan, like Japanese beauty of their life and their history and so on? Like, why don't you highlight more about Japan that rather than the role of Malaysia? I think.
Because I'm speaking as a Malaysian leader, and Japanese people already know their strength. That's why I don't emphasize much on Japanese strengths in my presentation. But it goes without saying, I think the whole world knows what Japanese is capable of. The beauty of your tea ceremony, the strength of your soft power in anime, all those things goes without saying. The African youth also consume Japanese products. The Islamic youth in Arab countries also consume animes or whatever Japanese products have churned out for the past 50 years. So Japan is not a stranger to these people. Just that Japan, in terms of economic footprint in these countries, are still not organic. I use the word not organic compared to China, for example. So we can do more and better by partnering with Malaysia, because Malaysia, as I said, has a very good social capital or diplomatic capital with these nations and region. So come together, join forces. We do a lot of JV, joint ventures program in economy, in culture, so that we can penetrate deeper into the region, Africa and Islamic countries. Like, for example, halal financing, halal food and production. So these are all a new growth area for Japan. That, halal is still new in Japan. So we can join forces in that aspect.
Thank you so much. And the question is about the gap between Japan and Malaysia. Malaysia and Japan has still the gap between Malaysia and Japan is still very big in terms of like the human security, governance, and so on. And then when there is a big gap, how can both countries enhance mutual learning and policy collaboration? Is it simple increase number of civil society think tanks? Is that enough? Is that enough?
No, definitely no. One of my proposal to Japanese ambassador is that we want track one. Okay, normally track one is involving the government, right? Government of Japan, government of Malaysia. But there's another lower level a bit, which is track 1.5, I would say, which is the parliament, the Diet and Malaysian parliament. Because we have a lot of members of parliament who also have a lot of, I would say, expertise. So we can form a joint caucus between Japan and Malaysia to explore all these, to address all these issues, gaps, and also potentials. So I would love to have that being made official by both governments at the level of legislative. So yes, I will support that.
Yeah, so more exchanges between the parliament members.
Yes.
Okay. And another question from Japanese audience about the Second World War. Okay, how the Malaysian people evaluate what happened during the Second World War so far? Evaluate and how remember it.
Okay. This is my own perspective, which I think being shared with many other Muslim and Malays. Yeah, we are very sympathetic to what happened in the tragedy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Despite Japan was, Japanese occupation was brutal in my country, but the memory of the atomic bomb was much more severe than the Japanese occupation. So that's why I said the Malaysian people at large do not dwell in the Japanese occupation history. We acknowledge the brutality of the Japanese Imperial Army, but we do not focus on that so much because we believe that let gone be bygone, but remember the past. Let bygone be bygone in the sense that we must work forward for the betterment of both countries and people. And I think there's no benefit of keep reminding the Japanese to apologize when you have apologized in the first place in 57 to us. So I think no Malaysian politician, I can tell you, made this issue as a main issue between Malaysia and Japan. Yeah.
簡単に今のお答え説明しますと、第二次世界大戦の時の日本の、マラヤの支配において、残虐性があったってことは確かにそうなんですけれども、それ以上に今の人たちは、広島、長崎に落とされた原爆による被害のことをより共感して考えている、日本被害者として見ている側面というのもあって、日本の占領というものは確かに記憶の中にはあるんですけれども、そこにフォーカスを当てることというのはしないと。今の日本に対して、より謝罪を求めるといったこともしていないし、それが政治的な争点になるということもマレーシアではないというお答えでした。もちろんちょっと補足すると、マレーシアの場合は、民族によって、チャイニーズなのかマレーなのかといった民族によって、その反応というのが違う、受けた被害というのも違うので、そこに対する認識の差がマレーシアの中でも差があるということについては認識が必要だと思うんですけれども、少なくともマジョリティの、マレー人のムスリムについては少なくとも今のようなお答えかなと思います。Okay, so I think I took so far all the questions and the time is over already. And I'm very sorry for okay.
That's all.
Okay,
Is it
okay.
possible
Please.
for
Yeah.
I speak up with mine?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, please.
Okay. Hi, and thank Assalamualaikum, YB, Faisal. I believe we met on Kamos
Okay.
3
Was.
days ago. I have one question, and I would like to hear your thought, which is, from my understanding, and I also met another business owner and another business owners in the halal industry in Japan. So the focus is on how we can promote the halal awareness in Japan as for the tourists coming, so they can know about halal in Japan. But in their thought, how we can advertise and how we spread the awareness on halal between the Japanese, because I think we both can agree the halal is not only limited to Muslims, it's not only limited to certain individuals. So how can we advertise and spread this awareness to all the Japan in world that this halal is the standard of the cleanliness in this or the area? Thank you.
Thank you, Muaz. Okay, may I answer? Okay, thank you, Muaz, for the question. A very important question, and I agree with you. Halal is not just only for Muslims, because in Quran, halal is not just a standalone word. Halal is also paired with tayyiban. Halal and tayyiban, right? In the Quran, Allah commands that. Meaning to say, halal is not just say Bismillah in the name of God, you slaughter your cow or your chicken, but it has to be accompanied with the proper ethics of producing the food. Tayyiban encapsulates wholesomeness, organic, pesticide-free. Isn't this all Islamic? It's Islamic, for God's sake. And good thing is Japanese is very good in this, right? So as I said, we can talk to Japanese people and get them to understand that what halal and tayyiban standard means is that we are, for example, against industrial farming. We are against pesticide rich farming. We are against torturing of animal in terms of food production. So if we can uplift halal from just a mere labeling to a practicing throughout the value chain of the production, subhanallah, may Allah guide and bless all of Japanese people who are already practicing this before becoming Muslim. So yes, the potential is so big, we just need more people to speak and write and have discussion about these standards. So I believe Malaysia can lead Japan the way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. The time is over. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
What, there are more questions?
Maybe, yeah, because there are some questions maybe officially maybe we can close the session, and the venue is actually
Oh, okay, the venue.
disclose the venue. But if you have the first quick question, while we are closing the session, maybe you can post your question here, and you can write the question here, and then we can answer. Okay, so
Sorry.
so thank you so much for your participation.
Oh, thank you.
Right, and thank you so much for your participation online and in venue. And ご参加どうもありがとうございました。
Yeah.
ハンドリングになかなかなんだっけ問題があって本当に申し訳ありません。手作りのセミナーでしたのでご容赦いただければと思います。どうもありがとうございました。あ
ありがとうございました。
りがとうございます。Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please go ahead with the question. If you're Adib-san.
Oh, sorry. Can I just talk through the Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
All right, sure. So, Assalamualaikum, YB. So, the question I would like to ask is there a website or somewhere we can learn about the initiative or the plan by both Malaysian and Japanese ambassador to promote collaboration between Malaysia and Japan so that we Malaysian and the Japanese can join the initiative?
Thank you, Adib, for your question. Unfortunately, no. There's no such website. In fact, at the moment, thank God the session is ended. I'll be frank with you, I've been fighting in Parliament about this because right now, the current government is not that serious in strengthening Japan-Malaysia relationship like what Tun Mahathir had done. So the Japanese were a bit upset when we tried to broaden Look East policy by making China part of it. Yeah, so there's quite sensitive issue there between the two countries that we failed to manage under the current present government. I reminded them many times to return back Look East policy department in our government. There should be a department or unit at least at the Public Services Department directly under the Prime Minister. That was what happened during Dr. Mahathir's premiership. For 22 years, Japan has been given a special attention. For obvious reason, because we have a lot of interest in Japan by sending our students and investment here and there. So these things are no longer there and a bit disorganized. That's why the ambassador is working very hard around the clock to promote look at each other policy. And I am one of his, I would say, assistant in that when it comes to politics. So I want this thing to happen. I agree with you, there should be a website like a one-stop center. And also, the Prime Minister must appoint one minister that become like a caretaker for this policy. Right now, I do not know who. Previously, it was Rafizi resigned. Then Zafrul also resigned. And I don't know whether Akmal Nasir, the current economic minister, is the one managing, or Joe Ghani and the MITI. But if they will be given the task, they are too busy focusing on other more pressing matters. So we are not in a very good shape at the moment, but nonetheless, I believe next government will change this thing, inshallah. Mark you my word, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your attendance.
All right. Okay, thank you.
We are going to go. Thank you so much.